Hello, I feel we have to talk about this report right here. This is a report coming out of the Stanford Internet Observatory Cyber Policy Center, which, for all I can tell, is a center associated or under Stanford University, and it's called Identifying and Eliminating CSAM in Generative ML Training Data and Models. If you don't know, CSAM is material that depicts underage people in explicit situations or circumstances, and therefore is obviously a very, very iffy and tricky, well, not tricky, but it is a topic that demands great care. This report right here specifically goes into the Lion 5B dataset, which is a dataset of links to images along with their captions and then some metadata. And it shows that it can find such material in that dataset. Notably, they have, if you sort of summarize it, they have found 1,008 images that are verifiably CSAM in the Lion 5B dataset. This has sparked obviously a bit of news. So various news outlets, researchers found child abuse material in the largest AI image generation dataset. Stanford researchers' large AI dataset has over 1,000 child abuse images. Study uncovers the presence of CSAM in popular training dataset. Lion 5B contains 1,008 verifiable instances of illegal pictures of children, likely lots more. Largest dataset powering AI images removed after discovery of child sexual abuse material. Lion itself has released a statement stating that they already had rigorous filters during the construction of the dataset, but in light of this news, they are taking the dataset down, verifying all of it before making it available again. So that's the current situation. So going back to this report, I have to say I don't like this report. I'm sort of laying out my biases here so that you are aware. I'm not a fan of this report, not because of the problem it investigates, which is obviously an important problem and a thing that should be investigated, but because of the way of how he goes about it. The second thing to make clear initially is that 1,008 images of such material is 1,008 too many. And there's no question about it. We should all work together to remove such material, not only from the data sets, not only from the internet, but just from the world, and prevent it from happening in the future. So there is no question about that. I don't like this report, not because of that, not because of the nature of the problem or anything like this, but because of the way it does things. I think this is if you want to call it a hit piece, I think it is a hit piece. I think it is being used in order to generate outrage and in order to achieve a hit against sort of the more free collection of data and models that's currently happening in the machine learning space. And I don't like it. And I say that because there are clear choices in this report that the researchers made that they could have made differently, and that I would have expected to be made differently, mostly if they were actually serious about, fully serious about this, about what they're saying. Also, obviously, even if you believe that these people here are serious about child welfare, the people who are most enraged about, I just don't believe it. The people who are most pressing the outrage button around this are people of the AI ethics crowd who are all over Twitter and, of course, Mastodon, and being like, "Oh, how terrible is this? Oh, this is so terrible. Oh, the models trained on it there. Oh, this contains that." The goal is just to spread around fear, to spread around any, like, essentially what the effect is, or maybe is supposed to be, is that you'll think twice before working with a model that's out of the open source community. You'll think twice before using a data set that's out of the open source community, because you could be, handling such material, therefore making yourself liable. Your model could produce very not good or even illegal images, and you don't want that. This people have enjoyed a time in recent years, not maybe anymore so much, but in recent years, where this kind of stuff was much more closed off, and they sat in high positions in all the important companies and government places, and had very tight grip on what was, how people could access this stuff. And this is not that much anymore. There is a lot more open source stuff going on. There is a lot more free sharing, and a lot of these people have left or been left from these positions in these companies. So this is maybe a bit of a call to return to such days, or maybe just a bit of a longing for that. But that's just what I see. Now let's dive into the report a little bit. The report itself, I can maybe lay out my criticism. My biggest criticism here is that they don't appear to have been very proactive in this. So they have a methodology of going through the Lion dataset and recognizing potential images that are problematic, and then they have various ways of verifying them. The final verification is by a project called Project Arachnid, I believe it's called. That itself is an automated system that then triages to actual experts that verify such material. And it's obviously great that that exists, and one argument they do correctly make is that maybe more data sets should make use of such infrastructure, but obviously that sometimes the sheer scale of data sets may not allow that. But they've not gone as far as I can tell to, for example, Hugging Face, and we're like, hey, we found this. We're not telling anyone about it yet, but what can we do to kind of remove all that stuff? They haven't gone to Lion, as far as I'm aware, and saying, hey, we have found this. Look, here is the thing. Then maybe remove them before we publish this, so that in the moment we publish this, people who are actually interested in it won't go and sort of download all the thing or try to find a dump somewhere because they think, oh, there's a bunch of images in there, right? It's like security researchers would sort of do this responsible disclosure ahead of time. As far as I can tell, none of this happened here because the press impact is much bigger if you release and then everyone goes, what? And at that point, Lion is kind of forced to take down the data set. So yeah, it's a much bigger impact press-wise, but for a trade-off of the problem you're trying to solve, it would be solved much more effectively by doing the thing that gets you less press. So the report dives in and goes into the development of Lion 5B. Lion 5B is, as I said, a data set of image links together with descriptions. So Lion is developed by essentially going through Common Crawl. A Common Crawl is a big crawl of the internet, going through it, filtering out the images, reading the alt tags or alt attributes of the image tags in HTML, and then using the clip model to check whether the text and image fits together well. If that is past a certain threshold, then it is a candidate for the data set, and then it goes through various filters and classifiers. The construction of Lion 5B, for example, contains an unsafe classifier that tells you whether the image is probably a not safe for work image or not. That doesn't necessarily exclude the image, but if an image is deemed unsafe and also an underage classifier hits, then it is excluded from the dataset. There are various other filters as far as I understand it. They also go into use by subsequent models. So the report here says, while the developers of Lion 5B did attempt to classify where the content was explicit, as well as to detect some degree of underage content, the most popular resultant models, namely Stable Diffusion 1.5, were ultimately trained on a wide array of content, both explicit and otherwise. In the subsequent 2.0 version of Stable Diffusion, results with an unsafe value higher than 0.1 were filtered out, resulting in a substantial lack of explicit material in the training set, hence making it difficult to generate explicit content. So far, so good, we all agree. This was met with widespread dissatisfaction from the community. This we also agree. But what comes now, resulting in Stable Diffusion 1.5 remaining the most popular model for generating explicit imagery. And there is where I see a little bit like it already goes into framing, right? All of these sentences and sub-sentences are correct. However, what actually happened is, because Stable Diffusion 2 was so nerfed, it was just not as good as Stable Diffusion 1.5. Not just because it couldn't do explicit stuff as much, but because it couldn't do a lot of stuff as much. And it is just the case that if you also, as a model, as a human, whatever, know of explicit, dark, whatever material, it allows you to create better art. It allows you to be more competent. It allows you to make a difference between something that's edgy and something that's not edgy, something that's explicit and something that's not explicit. In order to do that, you have to have at least a little bit experienced in that. Not in everything, right? You can generalize and so on. But and that was a big criticism of Stable Diffusion too. It was just worse. It was generally conceived to be worse, not because of the explicitness of the material, but just broadly. So technically correct. The second thing, resulting in Stable Diffusion 1.5 remaining the most popular for generating explicit imagery, probably also correct. Haven't looked into it, but probably also correct. You can imagine that people who want to create explicit imagery, and then there comes a model that is nerfed overall, but obviously specifically in that category, they would still stick to the old model. But if you put the two sentences together, it says something that and if you go to the bookmark here, or to the reference 14, look at that. 14, James Vincent from The Verge. Stable Diffusion made copying artists and generating porn harder, and users are mad. That's like this, ladies and gentlemen, this is peak journalism here. This is peak. This is peak. I pretend to be a journalist, but it's actually my opinion. There's no other way of framing, of interpreting someone writing an article with a title like this. And the fact that the article is what is cited here for that sentence, you can already see in which direction this goes. Again, the investigation here is, I'm convinced, is legitimate, right? The investigation into the problem is legitimate. But at the same time, the framing, the pulling it up, how it was done, how it was communicated, it seems to be, has all the characteristics of a hit piece. So they go into various things. They talk about two previous works that they've done in this field. One previous work, or preliminary work, was just filtering filtering the dataset down by various methods. So they start with unsafe, the unsafe classifier of Lion, right? This comes from Lion, the unsafe value. They start with that being really high, and then they pass those images to a service called PhotoDNA. PhotoDNA matches up images with known instances of things, and it's as far as I understand, a perceptual hash. So even if the images were slightly altered, it would still recognize that is the same image. So this is a database of material, among other things, material, CSAM material, and it will tell you if that particular instance is a known member of the database that has accumulated. Obviously, there are limitations because you can also only recognize known instances of such material and so on. But it's a first step. What I do find interesting is that they do rely quite a bit on that unsafe classifier by Lion itself. So they go through it and they say, well, that's not really enough. So they come up with another method, and that method has two main strands of, if you want to say, data filtering. So on one hand, they go to these unsafe images, go through PhotoDNA, take the URLs, and then what they do is they submit them to this project Arachnid. So this is a verification service with potential manual verification for such material. Then if they get back, yes, this is actually explicit such material, they take the embeddings of that image, which are also provided by Lion, and do a k-nearest neighbor query. And from that, they use a classifier to filter out the ones that are probably also such material, and then they can submit those again to that service. So they use the positive matches together with a k-nearest neighbor query in the embedding space and a classifier in order to find more and more and more. They also have another path right here. They're also sets, kind of hash sets. So this is similar to PhotoDNA, except it's not a perceptual hash, it's an actual hash. So this way you can also find some more images, because there is a database with known images, and you just check whether the image that you're looking at or the hash of that image is the same as in the database, and then you do the same thing. You do KNN queries and try to expand that set together with classifiers and this service. So in this way, they have found a number of instances here. I think this brings it together. So with one of these pathways, they found 825 validated ones. And with the other one of these pathways, maybe not, maybe these don't correspond to the pathways, but in another instance, or not instance, they found 183, and this together gives you the 1008 images that were discussed in the news. So going on, they have a t-SNE plot. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to recognize here, but it is a plot that kind of shows you the neighborhood of these things. So you can see the neighborhood of images is in categories that you might expect. Cartoon is one that I find interesting. That is obviously an entire discussion in itself. If cartoons that, are drawings of such material should be put in the same bucket or not, but let's just assume they should for now, which probably is viable. I don't know. So what are their recommendations? The recommendations is, let's just deprecate all of it, essentially. So removing material, removing from the original hosting URLs, okay, by submitting their URLs to such services, they already, like, that already triggers a process of removing such. Removal of the metadata entries in public Lion datasets. Well, at, again, as far as I understand, and I have not received any information to the contrary, either in this report from Lion or anywhere else, at the moment of publishing this report, this metadata was still in Lion, and therefore anyone could have done their method that they described up here to find, URLs linking to such material, rather than them going ahead of time to Lion and be like, look, this is illegal material. Yeah, they do have some, like, now there are screenshots flying around of people going to the Lion Discord and taking screenshots of, people making various statements like, oh, we can't verify all images manually, and they'd be like, see, and someone saying, there is explicit material here, and there could even be such material, and then people saying, well, we can't verify anything manually. That flies around, right? But to my knowledge, there is no instance of them going to Lion and saying, look, we did the study, there's 1008 verified links, please take them down. We're going to publish this report here in 60 days, and so that's your timeline. Remove the actual images. This is in case someone has already downloaded it somewhere. Remove of images and references in downloaded copies. Yes, okay. Removal from the models themselves. So removal from the models, they say right here, it's tricky, but it could be, for example, a concept erasure, like you could erase such concepts from the models. But also at the same time, they keep referring to their old work, which essentially shows that if a model understands the concept of not safe for work imagery and understands the concept of underage people, the model by pure generalization ability is able, or can be, or maybe, or is in some instances able to combine the two and produce such material without actually having been trained on it. And yeah, if you think about it, if you as a human, you've probably never looked at such material, at least not willingly or so. And yet, if you had, let's say, good Photoshop skills, and you were forced to do it, you would absolutely be able to produce something like this. So that makes sense. So they kind of jump back and forth, where they say, oh, anyway, it's problematic because you can just combine the concept. And they jump back and forth between saying, well, okay, what are the implications of us finding such stuff in the data set? And they go back and forth between, and then discussing, oh, well, but the models are bad anyway, because they anyway can produce such stuff. And, NSFW should not be trained on children material at all, right? And so I find that to be, I don't know, it just seems to take all the criticism and just throwing it, right, instead of making a coherent argument. Alterations to a model training process. Unfortunately, the repercussions of Stable Diffusion 1.5's training process will be with us for some time to come. With the advent of Stable Diffusion XL, there appears to be some degree of increasing user interest in this presumably safer model. We have previously, air the quotes here, we've previously proposed that models trained on erotic content not be trained in material depicting children. This limits the ability of models to conflate the two types of material. Indeed, given the regulatory scrutiny, yada yada, images of children should arguably be excluded from generalized training sets entirely. See, this entire paragraph here has nothing to do at all with the fact that they have found these particular 1008 images in the set right here. It's a valid point, but it has nothing to do with that, right? It's just yet another criticism we can dig out and throw at the Lion people, at the Stable Diffusion people, and so on. Yeah, okay. Yada yada, yada yada, yada yada. Yes. Conclusion. The most obvious solution is for the bulk of those in possession of Lion 5B derived training sets to delete them or work with intermediaries to clean the material. Models based on Stable Diffusion 1.5 that have not had safety measures applied to them should be deprecated and distribution seized where feasible. They've done nothing to show that this is a problem. Like, again, saying that under the full knowledge that it is a problem that the images are there, and yes, obviously training on them will influence in some way the output distribution, but has this report shown that due to those images, we now need to deprecate all the Stable Diffusion 1.5 models? I don't think so. The other thing I would like to point out or discuss is if you look at 1008 images in 5 billion, right? I know that there's probably more that weren't verified or caught or identified, but just the scale, like just the order of magnitude here, 1,000 pictures in 5 billion. That's 1 in 5 million. That means that 99 point or it's 0.00002% of the data set that is, you know, of that material. Like, this is small. Again, it's 1008 too many, but this is really, really, really few, right? And in other people understand trade-offs in other domains. Take immigration, right? Immigration has that discussion, but for some reason, the people there take exactly the opposite position. But it's exactly the same discussion. It is, can we, make it viable and not, like an impossible process for people to immigrate into a country or to visit a country, right? Applying some sort of checks with the knowledge that probably 1 in 5 million, more than that, many more than 1 in 5 million is going to be a really bad person, a child molester or anything like this. Not just a person in possession of such material, but a person actively participating in producing in such material, right? 1 in 5 million is probably a lot more, right? People understand this in drug discovery. Yeah, a new drug, it may be really, really, really bad for 1 in 5 million people that takes it. We don't take a drug off the market for that. Maybe we do, but at least people think about the trade-off in these things. And yeah, here you can say, well, the trade-off is you can make nice pictures and so on. The march of technology is, yes, it also goes via entertainment. I'm sorry, that's also a viable branch of the economy. And diffusion models and models trained on these things have been used for much, much more than just generating funny pictures. They have brought enormous research success and research progress to the machine learning world, especially to the open source world, countering big companies, countering people who just somehow, either by historical size or by some sort of government funding that they managed to scoop off, managed to get a ton of GPUs and train something and then just make cash off of that. Like, they're in every other situation, people are perfectly happy to say, okay, what's the problem and what's the trade-off that we go in. And that does not invalidate the problem. That does not say, oh, it's not a problem, we don't need to take care of it. But the people pushing the outrage buttons and the proposed solutions of, let's just, this is so problematic that let's just throw it all. And yeah, that's what makes this kind of content more into the domain of hit piece. And maybe it's actually not just the report that is so real bad, because the investigation again is good. It's also the surroundings. It's also the people pushing it and so on. And yeah, that's what makes me think they're not that serious about child welfare, because in any other domain, they're perfectly capable of talking about this, looking at the scale and what it actually says, and making somewhat reasonable arguments. Yet, if it happens to align with their preferences of whatever the current landscape, the current politics in ML, then all of a sudden that goes out the window. So that is a bit my opinion of this. Obviously, if Lion is calling on the Stanford researchers to participate in generating better filters and classifiers, as I think they would be happy if anyone contributes to their already existing set of such filters. And yeah, having such material in any training data set is obviously not good, and we should all work together to eliminate that. In that sense, the study did something well. It investigated it. It highlighted that these things exist. Yeah. And I think it also makes a lot more people aware that there are services, there are institutes, there are APIs where you can verify that something is problematic potentially. You can submit that there, and you don't have to be in possession of the material. You can submit a URL, for example. So you don't. This study right here, they did, for the part where they did k-nearest neighbor embedding, I believe they did download the material and to RAM. But you don't even have to do that for most of the verification process. You can just submit the URL. And I think, if anything, making more people aware that such services exist is a good thing after all. And if the report has done nothing else than that and highlight how stupidly ridiculous tech journalism is nowadays, yeah, then that's ultimately a good thing. All right, this was it. I hope you're having a good time other than that, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.